Dumb. But still pretty fun. Than just flat out dumb. My friends and I used to hold scavenger hunts that involved doing things rather than finding things. We got the idea from Viva La Bam and thought it would be fun. The first time we did it, it was only 4 of us. But we had fun going through the list. Then we started inviting more and more people, and by the last year we did it we had like 30 people playing. The items on the list, which grew to about 175 things, were really stupid. There were eating challenges, like eating a raw onion, half a dozen eggs, chugging milk, eating a dollar bill. Then there were things like going to the store, buying a box of condoms and box of tampons and telling the cashier it's going to be a messy night. Then you had to give away the tampons and make condom balloons. One of my favorite stupid ones to do was hold an argument with a street sign for at least 3 minutes. Bonus points if you made it to 5. We also had simple ones like get a hug from 5 strangers and build a human pyramid. But a majority of them were really dumb. On the weekends we would wait until about 10 PM at night and we would go garage hopping. Drive through nicer neighborhoods looking for anyone at that point who had left their garage open. Take a peek to see if there's an outdoor fridge in the garage, and if so, sneak in to see if there's any beer. The biggest score I ever had was a full unopened case. I thought I was going to be the hero of the party that night. We get back to the house of our waiting friends with our prize and one of them tells me I'm a dumbass. It was Sharp's non-alcoholic beer. My senior year in high school, starting in about February, I would sneak into my now ex-girlfriend's house every night. We hung out at her house after school and her mom usually invited me to stay for dinner. We'd all chat after dinner, watch a movie, whatever. Her mom and sister would go to bed and I pretended to leave, opening door, saying goodnight, etc. Then we'd go to her room. I would sleuth back into my own house in the morning to shower, change, and get ready for before school orchestra. This happened until a couple weeks before graduation. Apparently I'm not sneaky. My mom found out first and took my car away. Didn't matter much, because my so had a car. Then it became a game of her pretending to give me a ride home and us just going out for a bit and coming back. Still not sneaky enough. Her mom came home one day and nonchalantly said, "You know, maybe you should clear one of your drawers for Professor Lama so he can keep some clothes here. That way he doesn't have to go home so early in the morning." So, I officially, partially moved in for the summer. TL. Doctor, I can never be a cat burglar. Couldn't sneak up on one in a million years. Tried cow tipping. Ended up getting kicked by a cow and got 2 broken ribs. Edit. Well, since my top comment ever is about me being a dumb teenager, I can share the story. I grew up in Texas. I don't remember how the subject came up, but the general consensus was that you can tip cows cause they're too big. There was that one guy though that swore that him and his cousins go out cow tipping all the time. He was such an ass about it we all went out one night to one of the local pastures just to prove him wrong. We snuck up to one and tried to push it over. It was like trying to move a brick wall. It ended up just getting pissed off and kicked out at us and caught me right in the chest. I ended up in the emergency room with 2 broken ribs. In the end we proved that Lucas was full of shit and you can tip cows. Probably around age 13. Early 1980s. My dad had surplus reel-to-reel magnetic tapes. Or maybe it was 8 tracks. You know how you can pull it and snap it easy? Cool, huh? Anyway, while waiting for some friends to finish dinner I took the tape to the soccer field. There was a nice hill beyond the goal posts. I thought it would be great to wrap some of the tape from one goal post to the other, then ride my bike down the hill, bursting through the tape like I won a race. I've never won a race. I did too many rounds of tape. So all those strands of tape just stretched across my chest, didn't break, which suspended me in air like Wile E. Coyote as my bike continued across the field. I landed on my tailbone, in pain, embarrassed and wondering if anyone saw my wonderful failure of a race finish. When I was 15 I went to my ex-boyfriend's house. We were in the middle having sex when we heard footsteps coming up the stairs. We knew immediately it was his mom back from work. Well, turns out his mom told him not to have me over. Ran butt naked into his walk-in closet. I was hid behind the door when his mom checked his closet looking for me. Thankfully she didn't see me. After over a half-hour argument in his room, he convinced her to take him to the school to pick up something. Waited 10 minutes after the left, then bolted out the door into a huge storm. As I'm running through the neighborhood, they come back and into full view of me. I quickly slid behind a bush and into an anthill. Thank God she didn't see me. In the end I ran through the storm with a leg covered in ants till my friend picked me up. TLDR. Almost got caught by my ex's mom while we were having sex. End up running through a storm with ants all over my leg. Got crazy wasted at the Pink Floyd laser show at the Hayden Planetarium on a Friday night in Nick. And afterwards fell into the subway tracks as the one train was approaching the station. Thank God that Chris, big, sane friend, was there to jump down, pick me up, throw me onto the platform as I kinda scrambled up, and then jump back up himself. It's remarkable because he was likely as high as I was. I'm told that it wasn't insanely narrow, but there wasn't the largest of windows. Not sure if dumb or awesome, but for my 18th birthday, we went around in 3 cars stealing signs cones from roadworks areas at about 3 AM. Not enough that you'd notice, but 1 or 2 pieces from each setup. Next we went and closed off part of a road, with all the proper signage and markings. It took 3 weeks before people realized no one was showing up at this roadworks area and called the transit authority to find out what was going on. A week later, it was all gone. I ate an extremely strong edible 2 hours before playing in the senior versus staff basketball game in front of the entire school. Didn't do too bad, but it was still the highest that I have ever been. I mean, I literally had moments where pretty much all I could see looked like TV static. It was scary, but we ended up winning and I never got in trouble for it. This is actually very impressive. Edibles make doing anything extremely difficult. I once ate one while throwing a football around at a park. I felt fine and dropped a pass. Went to pick it up and just fell down. Sat there for over 20 minutes because I couldn't get up. Everyone just laughed at me. When one of my friends had an edible once, he felt so weak that moving his laptop from his bed to his nightstand, right next to his bed, felt like it took all of his strength. When I went into middle school, I took all my elementary school papers and books and put them in my kitchen garbage bin and soaked it with lighter fluid. After my kitchen garbage bin ignited and had 2-3 foot flames, I started throwing towels on it to kill the fire, then they caught on fire too. I used my sink hose thing to put out the fire. All that remained was a mushy ball of molten plastic. I nearly burnt down my house doing some retarded Viking ascension ceremony. Edit. To answer a few questions, I did it because I saw a big container of lighter fluid and wanted to burn something. At that moment I realized I don't need elementary papers anymore. Because in my 10-ish mind I was no longer a kid. Also because fire was awesome. And my parents did found out. I actually 2 separate beatings for it. One for actually doing it, and another for lying about it. I threw away the molten lob after it cooled. I told them later I accidentally threw away the kitchen garbage bin when I was taking out the trash. My foolproof lie failed when they realized the ceiling had burnt marks. I snuck out to do teenagerly things at around midnight and got back at around 4 in the morning. I very slowly, agonizingly slowly, took my keys out of my pocket, selected the correct key, inserted it into the front door lock at a speed of 1 tumbler per fortnight, rotated it counterclockwise while palming the rest of the key so as to not let them jingle, and successfully unlocked the door. I removed the key from the lock at the same snail's pace and put my keys back in my right front pocket. I went to reach for the doorknob and rang the doorbell. That was when I died. My older brother and I moved in together when I turned 18 so he could show me some of the basics of living away from home for the first time. We developed a complex decision-making system where each person marked a piece of bread in some way, buttered it, and threw it at the ceiling so it stuck. The person whose bread stayed there the longest got their way. This also developed into a spending policy, where if you wanted to make a spur of the moment purchase, the voice of reason buttered a slice of bread and stuck it. Once it fell, the person could make the purchase. More often than not, by the time the bread fell, the urge to buy had passed. I farted while we were spread out sitting on the ground in my gym class. Everyone looked behind towards me and I looked behind me, only to see that I was looking at a wall. This is legit the best way to respond to it. +1 if you turn back and give sort of a "can you believe that fucking guy?" look to everyone as you slightly shake your head and point behind you. People who socially agile to think of this in the moment, as opposed to in the shower hours later, are not the type of people who get in awkward situations like that in the first place. Got drunk for the first time. Lit fireworks inside my best friend's car. Fell down a country embankment escaping the carnage and landed in a stream. Started crying because I thought I peed myself but was too blitzed to realize my pee was cold and about 4 inches deep. Friends laughed because my ass was just in a stream. Followed this by raiding a Krispy Kreme factory, more like sang loudly at the people working in the docking bay and asking if their esteemed excellencies would bestow the blessing of donuts on us. Workers I guess were amused or just wanted us to stop singing new wave songs at them, so they gave us a couple boxes of fresh warm donuts. I came home late and obviously drunk. When I entered, I had mud on my ass, twins in my hair, and a half-empty box of donuts held over my head. I yelled, "Gift for the elder gods," and presented them to my mother, who just burst out laughing and told me to drink some water and get to bed. That night could have gone so much worse. I didn't even get in trouble. My mother insisted my hangover in the morning would be punishment enough. I didn't have a hangover, but I totally faked one to avoid getting grounded. When I was 15, I masturbated with an insertion technique for the first time, using a AA battery. It was the closest thing in the room. At the time that could also fit inside. Felt pretty good, but then I couldn't get it out. Tried fishing it out. Pushing it out. No avail. I began to get anxious because I remembered that they can combust under heat and I didn't know how to tell my parents that I put a freaking battery inside my vagina. A couple days passed. My urine was black and I went to the hospital. Was extremely embarrassed and afraid the doctor would know what I did. But instead I just got meds for a UT. It came out about a week later while doing regular bathroom business. And never again did random objects go inside me. This happened when I was 15. I was in my parents' closet playing with my dad's gun I had recently found. I was doing that thing where there is a bullet in the chamber and you take the magazine out and cock the gun and the bullet comes out. Pull the trigger and it only clicks. I was distracted and thought I got the bullet out of the chamber. So I pulled the trigger and bang. The bullet happened to be in the chamber. Took me a second to realize what happened due to the surprise. At his point my ears were ringing like hell. I shot the floor. The only thing you could see was a black mark around the carpet. No visible bullet hole. I got the black mark cleaned up and thought all was well. Went downstairs soon after to find out I shot through the carpet, out the ceiling and into the wall. I started freaking out, wondering how to cover it all up. I got the stuff that fixes holes in drywall and took care of the small hole on the ceiling and painted it. Now the bullet had entered the wall at such an angle that it made a slash mark the size of my hand. I knew I couldn't cover this one up. So I called my mom and convinced her that I accidentally chucked a hatchet into the wall. I then cleaned up all the drywall dust of the floor, found the bullet, and got ready for the job interview that I had in 10 minutes. Parents never found out. And I never got in trouble for chucking a hatchet in the wall. I also got the job. This was probably one of the most stupid things I have ever done to date, but alas. I was 17. I lived in a small town where there wasn't much to do, and for fun we would play cops and robbers, you know. Where half of our friends would be in cars with spotlights as cops and the other half were on foot as robbers. Anyways. One night I happened to be a robber and was running past an empty parking lot when I spotted a car that I knew belonged to a girl that was from my school, and I did not like this girl. I was with some other friends, so we run up to the car and lo and behold, my sleazeball boyfriend and this girl are in the back seat. I completely saw red. They start to drive off in the car and like a complete psychopath I start to run after the car. And then I jump on the moving car. Like I'm some kind of stunned woman or some shit. Anyways. I crawl over the top of the car and I'm looking into the car from the windshield and see my dumbass boyfriend just gawking at the fact that he either just got caught red-handed cheating on me or B is dating a girl that jumps on moving cars. IDK. But at that point I jumped off the car and ran away. Needless to say, the relationship was trashed and school was very uncomfortable. I was about 16. Driving around in Essex, England. We knew where there would be a huge milk bottle delivery at a school around 2 AM. Me and some friends thought it would be absolutely hilarious to nick the milk and take it to a cow's field to see if the cows would drink it. Halfway across a bridge, not Stabby Bridge, but probably one close to there. Few stabby stoner bridges in England, you see. The boot of the car flew open and 60 milk bottles smashed out all over the road. There's me in the back panicking to close the boot trunk. The car behind took the number plate, just glad it wasn't my car. And glad I wasn't the school classes teacher that next morning with 60 reception. Kindergarten. Kids screaming for their milk. Ran out of gas on a rural road at midnight in the middle of winter, -30°C, without any emergency gear or appropriate winter clothing. Oh yeah. This was also before cell phones were a thing. I'm incredibly lucky and grateful for people drove by, picked me up and took me to a gas station. Teenage stupidity can be very dangerous. I established a crime ring in my school. It started when I didn't want to eat the sandwiches my mom made for me. So I started selling them for $2.5 a piece. When I was traveling to Russia, I discovered a huge price difference in softer guns and started importing them and sold them to German kids with a 500% markup. I started getting more friends into the business and we were selling softer Kalashnikovs, pump guns, Uzis and so on. In the same time, some of us were stealing from a supermarket on the other side of our school. We didn't steal small things. We went for 3-4 packs of Pringles we sold for 1/2 price to students. I paid some older guys with 3 packs of chewing gum on daily basis as protection against annoying people. One guy got caught and he confessed, told the police who else was stealing. All of us lied and told the police that we stole 2-3 times some Snickers. So we had to pay back $8.10. We mobbed him until he left school. The whole bubble collapsed when most of us changed school and we didn't had the opportunity to utilize our breaks. Getting ready for middle school, one day I saw some potatoes on our counter and figured I could utilize this for something funny. I grabbed one and the only thing I could come up with between the bus ride and first hour was to shove it down my shorts and wing it. I made it to about halfway to class when it dropped out from my boxes and rolled across the walkway. Confused laughter. Horrified looks. And me only saying, how'd that get in there? Double quote. This is my first ever post. Hope you all enjoy the story. I was a clueless college freshman and really wanted to make friends. I eventually found a group that I would hang around regularly and we had several classes together. So on this faithful day I was hanging out with my friends before class and one of the guys pulls out a large bag of pot brownies. So at this point in my life I had never drank any alcohol. Nonetheless taken any drugs, really sheltered upbringing. Well, this dude hands me a large brownie and I didn't want to be lame, so I fell into the peer pressure and ate the whole thing. While we get to class. Mind you, this is a lecture style class with over 100 students. And I settle in for the lecture. About 20 minutes into the lecture the hallucinations begin. I vividly remember the roof of the building being ripped off and I began to fly through the sky. I know, weird. I also was convinced the professor was a devil and she wanted to eat me. I had to be escorted out class because I began to flip shit. To this day I haven't taken edibles since. I wanted to dye my hair blonde. Hearing the term bleaching your hair, I did the only logical thing and dumped out a couple gallons of bleach into a 5-gallon bucket and proceeded to dunk my head in it. I only got the top and back of my head. But it got unbearable to keep my head in the bucket very long. My eyes stung and I couldn't breathe well. So I would go in for a few seconds at a time. I kept looking in the mirror to see if my hair was blonde yet. And since it wasn't, I went back in for more. My scalp started to burn like shit. But I pushed through, no pain no gain. Right? Dot. Eventually though I had to give up. It did in fact dye my hair. But I have very dark hair. And I did not know how hard it is to go from that to pure blonde. So I ended up with crazy orange carrot top hair. Not only that, but my scalp turned into one giant scab. And for several months after that my head would flake off some scabs and start bleeding. I have no idea how my hair survived such an ordeal. But it somehow managed to heal. And looks pretty normal now. I have to admit to having done some extremely risky, likely illegal, and certainly stupid, albeit well planned, things as a teen. I would have to say that tricking the local PD, in a small rural town, to embark on a form of scavenger hunt was clearly stupid. Even though I didn't get caught. And found it funny as hell. It was planned with a very small group of my closest cousins. We began by taking some local landmarks, hiding them using a geocaching method around the county, so that each found piece contained clues or riddles that would let you find the GPS coordinates for the next missing item. The items weren't necessarily high value, but they were mostly Son Ronald, either state or county property. So I guess they felt compelled to hunt for the items and trying to figure out who we were. It started by placing a borrowed Ronald McDonald statue, the ones that would be sitting on the benches, on the hood of a police cruiser with typed instructions in a plastic cover attached to it. It explained the game and gave the first series of clues. No one was hurt, but it certainly wasted PO time. We were never ID'd and it only made local news. But this was quite a long while back. So our fear of being met with violence was much smaller. It was a bunch of young idiots who just got way too bored one summer. Obligatory not me but my friends shot BB guns at cars. They picked a spot on a bridge overlooking traffic and took shots at cars. There were maybe about 10 of these sophomores in high school each armed with an air gun. Worked out well. Until one of the geniuses used a metal BB and broke a car windshield. Car pulled over and everyone immediately ran. Most of them were caught by cops who anticipated where they would run. One of them made it home. Someone ratted and they found the one who got away and took him away for questioning. The guy who owned the car was nice. Did not press charges and I think he even paid for the windshield. Every kid was murdered by their parents that night though. I was at the time playing video games with my best friend in my basement, knowing full well, being in on their planning sessions that day at lunch, what was going to happen. I even got live updates in the form of phone calls as they were running from the cops. When me and my now brother-in-law were 17, we were driving around town late one night when we stopped at a red light. There was a white Mustang next to us with a pretty blonde woman driving. We were in a black Eclipse and thought it'd be fun to race the Mustang. I rev the engine and take off on green. The Mustang comes flying by us and cuts me off and brakes to a stop. Woman gets out and runs to my window hollering, "You better be glad I'm on my way to work and not already in my patrol car or I would fuck you up." She was a cop and told us to get our dumbasses home, and if she saw us out again that night, we would have hell to pay. So many to choose from. Let's go with. Got suspended in middle school, I think for a fight. Mom came and picked me up, brought me to her work, a church, and had me scrub walls as punishment. I ain't down with this shit. Lieutenant D my way out of there real quick. And walked to my friend's house. They weren't home, as they were not suspended. So I waited around for a few hours till they got home. Hung out with them till they had to go in, 7 or 8ish. Called my parents and asked for a ride. They said I should have thought of that earlier and made me walk the like 8 miles home. TLDR. Got suspended. Mom tried punishing me. Left and went by my friend's house instead. Had to walk a long way home late at night. Me and my friends used to break into abandoned houses and buildings just because we had nothing better to do, and it was pretty cool until we broke into the wrong house, which happened to be a meth house. At the time no one was there, but there were chemical bottles everywhere along with Gatorade bottles with tubes going to each other, along with a bunch of knives and machetes laying around the place. Once you smell what a meth house smells like, you never forget. Needless to say, we never broke into abandoned houses again after that. I took a water bottle full of vodka to school. BC my friend saw my parents' fully stocked bar and thought it would be a good idea for me to bring some for us to share. This was when I first started making a decent amount of friends and being a teenager. Just wanted to fit in. Come lunchtime, 4 of us share the bottle of vodka and get plastered. I end up straddling my boyfriend at the time in the middle of the cafeteria and make out with him like no one is watching for a good 5 minutes. I'm also a guy. For some reason no one really said anything until lunch was over and it was time for 5th period, in which I could not stay in my chair without falling. After my 3rd time falling, I just lay on the floor and in walks the principal, who escorts me out of class. I went back to the high school to sign my younger brother out of class a few months back, and one of the assistant principals calls in the principal and he greets me with, "Oh, you're vodka boy. Stroke." That was not only the dumbest thing I've done as a teenager, but the dumbest in my life. Went on a snowboard trip with the homies to Banff, Canada. My friend forgot he had a joint and a cigarette box in his pocket. We were standing in line to go through security. He gets randomly chosen to be physically frisked. The security lady had him empty his pockets. And by the grace of God, they never checked the cigarette box. He walks through security without issue. But then we decide we have not had enough excitement for one day, and decide to smoke the joint in the airport, inside the terminal where they have the indoor smoking areas. Looking back at it, it was the most ridiculous shit I have ever done. Took magic mushrooms thinking that I had double art, only to return to my form room and discover that we were having a full school assembly as 2 policemen were coming in to talk about drug abuse. I hadn't come up at this point, so I thought I would ride it out. I came up about 10 minutes into the assembly and it was not fun at all. The walls were moving and the people around me had no faces, and the policemen were massive, like 10 feet tall. I just closed my eyes and sang "All the Ducks Are Swimming in the Water" to myself. My partner in crime had done the sensible thing and left the school when he heard about the assembly. Anyway, 2 hours later I emerge a quivering wreck and made a beeline for the exit, only to be caught by the headmaster. Panic set in. She took one look at me and said, "Get yourself home. You look awful." She mustn't have been listening during the assembly because my pupils were like black holes. I spent the rest of the day out in the fields trying to counteract the hellish 2 hours I had just experienced. It was a stupid idea and something I never repeated. I just stuck to an occasional reefer. Took too many shrooms but didn't realize I had. So I took the rest, which was the other half, 7 grams. Shortly after I realized this was gonna go downhill. So in a panic I began googling pharmaceuticals I may have in my house to counteract the trip. I found out a ton of my brother's Xanax might do the trick and put me to sleep. But no. Instead, in the medicine cabinet I accidentally took my mother's antipsychotic medicine. Long story short, those two didn't mix well. I ran around my house for allegedly 2 or so hours completely naked, screaming in a British accent while my other brother chased me. Bonus embarrassment point being in a very wealthy neighborhood. Apparently almost drowned myself in the river in the backyard. Last thing I remember is morphing into some form of monkey zombie combo, and then it all went black. I woke up on the floor in my basement with a towel over me, still nude, with my brother sitting there on his phone looking at me like, "Dude." Double quote. To start with, I am a female. I was in the mood. Being a young teenager who lives back in the woods and isn't exactly that attractive, I was overweight, and way too embarrassed to ask my mom to buy me a vibrator. I had to improvise. So I ended up using a back scrubber. Unfortunately, stupid me didn't think about taking the string off beforehand. So after I'm done I take it out and notice it's missing. I start freaking the fuck out and try getting it out. I couldn't. After about 15 minutes I surrender and go to my mom and pull her aside and tell her what happened. It took her 5 minutes to stop laughing, and before she took me to the car to take me to the hospital to get it removed. To make matters even better, the DR who removed it was a male, so that was fun. My mother's favorite story and the one she won't ever let me live down. This happened on my aunt's birthday, so every year on her birthday mom calls me up just to tell me. I've also earned the nickname Scrubby Wubby. This happened recently. I developed a bad habit of going on late night jogs and decided to go at 9 PM. Thinking that it's not 10. So it can't be that dark. Anyway, it was dandy until I got to a small forest section of the trail and it was dark. Thankfully I had the weak light from my phone to shine the way. I managed to get out of the woods with no problems, and as I turned right onto a lighted sidewalk I managed to run into a tree. Also the time I turned in a paper for my college English paper that I wrote in high school. But I forgot to change the date and the teacher went off with two guys I met at Knott's Berry Farm. I was 15 and they were in their late teens. They had a real nice convertible sports car. I was at Knott's with some friends. But I left with these two. No one knew where I had gone. They took me to this beautiful mansion on a cliff overlooking the ocean in Corona del Mar. The guy who lived there said his parents were in Europe. We got drunk, played chess, and I wandered the house looking at the amazing art displays. We had lots of sex and at some time I can't remember I fell asleep. Woke up around 7:00 AM, had more sex, and they took me home. I was very stupid. We used to break into Freedom Tunnel back in the 90s in uptown Manhattan and just hang out and throw small parties. Freedom Tunnel is a long underground abandoned tunnel that's famous for graffiti and urban explorers. It was always dangerous. But we didn't care at the time. Then a girl that we brought was stabbed 6 times by a crazy person right near us, and we couldn't do anything about it because the music we were playing was so loud we could barely hear her muffled screams. It was a small knife. But the sight of her covered in blood suddenly shrieking was horrifying. As my family had no functioning chimney at the time, the fireplace ran on bottles of ethanol fuel. I enjoyed lighting the fire then squirting additional fuel onto it from the bottle. One time I squirted a bottle that was mainly vapors, but had a small quantity of liquid at the bottom. The vapors ignited and pushed the bottle backwards, forcing the rest of the now igniting fuel out of the nozzle of the bottle. This makeshift liquid fuel thruster then proceeded to smash through my family's sash window. But I wouldn't exactly call it stupid, because that is literally rocket science. I decided to drive home in the early morning after a house party in the countryside. I was still a little buzzed hungover. The road home was a really windy back road with virtually no shoulder, and no other cars in sight. I was a stingy high school kid, so I brought my half-full box of beers back with me. Threw them under a blanket in the back of my Toyota 4Runner. Well, I was sort of weaving back and forth. I accidentally weaved too far to the right and my front wheel went over the shoulder and got caught on the outside edge of the shoulder. It started pulling me into the ditch. So I slammed my brakes and tried to turn away from it. But it was no use. I went into the ditch and totally wrecked my suspension in the front of my car. I immediately jumped out and ran to the back so I could retrieve my box of beers, and I threw them in the bushes about 20 meters away. I was able to start my car again and slowly drive home. But the damage was done. Officially, the car was totaled. My first car. And my first car accident. All because of me. Not a single other soul in sight. I felt like such an asshole telling that to my parents, who of course paid for my car and insurance at the time. Eventually, we were able to sell the car to a 4Runner collector for a decent price. But I was without a car for a year and had to get rides to school with my neighbor. Maybe not the stupidest thing I did as a teenager, but it was up there. I pantsed someone in 8th grade. Got suspended for a week. Was accused of sexual harassment. And was told that I would never be allowed to attend college due to my crime. All of this while my mother cried in hysteria and horror that her son was a sexual deviant. Fuck you mom, get over it and stop telling my little brother I was the devil. Addendum. My classmate asked me to pants him. Quoting Yo Loop in the 4th, pull my pants down, I have really cool new boxers I want the girls to see. To this I shrug my shoulders and pull his pants down. I was immediately taken down to the office and accused of treason. I didn't choose the middle school life. The middle school life chose me. I remember kids doing worse things like beating up a kid and only getting 3 days of suspension and parents being all whatevs and don't do it again about it. So watching my mother overreact really rustled my jimmies. They lied to me as I was able to go to college only to become a dropout like Kanye West, except I'm not a narcissist. Nor successful. Nor rich. Sigh. Time to join the Legion. FFL, here I come. When I was 10 or so, a friend of mine moved away. Myself and another would sneak into the house as it was being worked on. We would creep around, Splinter Cell style, as we heard painters talking upstairs. The first few times, the house was totally empty, however, so we would use the phone to make prank calls and play on the pool table that had been left behind. One night, we scouted the area. Painters were present. My friend, one, helped me up onto the patio deck. I spent 5 minutes creeping slowly, as I wasn't sure if the painters were all upstairs. I got to the sliding door and looked inside. There were bottles and pizza boxes on the kitchen table. I kept checking. Nobody there. I went to slide open the door, when suddenly I could hear and feel footsteps walking fast in my direction. I bolted and swept myself under the railing, scraping my back, landing on my feet and letting out a whimper. My friend calls from the bushes, "Are you alright?" A man immediately comes out of the sliding glass door and trundles to the end of the deck. "Hello? Tom? George? Rick? Greg?" I was directly underneath, dead silent, watching him move through the cracks between the boards. I nearly laughed. It was too cinematic. He genuinely started listing names, walked in circles for a minute, and then went back inside. My friend and I promptly hopped the fence and dashed away. Senior year of high school. I'm basically the weed dealer for the entire school. Out on a gravel road late at night in my car, my girlfriend at the time smoking bowls. Can't smoke at home, parents. Parked at the top of a hill. See a car coming. Flip a bitch and speed away. It was a cop. I see the lights come on. They have to be like 1/8 mile away. This being rural Oregon, there are tons of gravel roads and offshoots you can cut down. I turn a corner and cut into a little drive-in area that's used for a farmer's field and I kill the lights. I proceeded to drive across this farmer's field in my little lowered Honda Civic that had ground effects and rims and all that stupid shit kids want for their car. Make it all the way across to another road. Pull out onto the road. Flip on my lights and head out. Notice my car is making a weird sound. But rather than stay near where I was, I decided to take my girlfriend home. I get her home, get out of the car to see what's wrong, and I had ripped the bottom part of my front bumper off and it was rubbing on my tires. Needless to say, needed a new bumper and 2 new tires as they were pretty fucked up from driving 10 miles with a bumper pressing against them. I was one of those kids who would steal their own mother's car at night and go joyriding. I think it was the 3rd time that I did, when I crashed it into a telephone pole and totaled it. It caused her a lot of stress for a couple months, but she ended up getting a newer car that lasted her many years with the insurance money. I was a prime suspect in the case but was never arrested or got in trouble for it. It all worked out. My mom still believes it wasn't me. I'll tell her when one of us is on our deathbed. Went to Detroit at night when I was 15 to get drunk with some friends. Ended up in some chick's house with coke on the table and way too many shady ass people. Wasn't worried till I realized my friends were nowhere in sight. After trying to think of a way out of the situation since no one would answer their phones, I learned that despite the drug habit and illicit criminal activities going on around me, the people were pretty chill. The girl who owned the place ended up driving me home after she realized I was completely out of my element. Next day I resubbed to World of Warcraft because yay fuck my friends for ditching me.